All right, so we're going to look at these four parts of a spending and saving plan today. These are all interconnected. So we have setting goals, income, expenses, and savings. And we always like to say before, it's okay if there are some parts of these you already feel comfortable with and some parts you're still working on. They all impact each other, but there's always room to improve in all of them. So if there are some that you need more improvement, that's perfectly fine. We want to give you the tools to improve all of them over time, but it's not all going to happen right at once. And if you fall behind in one of these areas, that doesn't mean you have to give up all of your success in the other areas. You just work towards those small improvements in whatever areas you need to. So first, we're going to talk about setting goals. And setting goals can help you accomplish whatever dreams you have for yourself financially and in your life. And goals can be really different for everyone. So you want to look at what you value and what is important in your life at this moment. So if you value, for example, supporting your family, the goal might be starting a 529 savings account for your child or supporting your elderly parents. If you value time to relax, you might be saving for a vacation goal. So what one person might have as their values and their goals throughout this might be different than yours, and that is perfectly okay. We are here to help you set your goals and work towards your budgeting and savings plans, no matter what your goals and values might be. The things we want to consider are also short-term versus long-term goals. So what is the short-term goal that you want to accomplish much sooner versus the long-term goals that you have maybe throughout your life or through a very long period of time? And we want to look at our financial choices and whether or not they help us get towards these goals that we're setting. So, what does a better life mean to you? Is it no debt? Is it owning a home, paying off some of that pesky credit card debt? Knowing what that means to you will help you to better prioritize how you spend your money and how you can build a system to measure and track your progress towards those things that you're working on, um, towards making a better future. And our goals are always flexible. So, something that you might be looking at now might not be the same goal that you have in even a few months, but they're always flexible. So, even once you set a goal, we can always be adjusting them to what our needs are. So we're going to talk about SMART goals a little bit. And SMART goals are things that will help make your goal setting a little more concrete and understandable. So we can set goals for all sorts of things. It can be something like paying for a wedding or education, paying off debts, buying a new home, home repairs, buying a new car, having an emergency fund, or planning for your retirement. And the SMART goals really help set up what you're trying to accomplish and a better way to track when you've achieved those things. So we have specific, what are you trying to do? Measurable, how will you know when you've achieved it? Achievable, is it within your power to accomplish it? Relevant, is it relevant to your values and goals? And time bound, so when do you want to accomplish it by? So we'll look at an example, and a non-SMART goal would be, I want to pay my debt. That is certainly a goal, but it doesn't have these aspects that make it a little easier to track and make sure that you're able to achieve. So instead of that, we could say, I want to pay $600 of debt in the next 6 months, which means I need to pay at least $100 each month to reach this goal. So we have a really specific goal in mind, paying $600 of credit card debt. It's measurable in that we can see when we've reached that final goal of paying off $600, and it has that smaller measurable piece of paying at least $100 each month. Is it achievable? So in this case, yes, this is achievable for this person setting this goal, $100 a month to pay off that $600. You don't want to have a goal that's like, I'm going to pay off $20,000 of debt in the next month if you know that you're not going to be able to meet that goal. So we want to keep it in that achievable range. Is it relevant? Is it relevant to your values and your overall financial goals? In this case, yes. And time bound, we're going to do it in the next 6 months. That makes it a lot easier. If you're someone like me who works well with a deadline, if you don't have one, you just keep pushing it back. Having that time bound piece can really help with that accountability. So there are a few steps here for setting goals. You want to break your larger goals into small actionable steps. So again, if you have, $20,000 of credit card debt, you might want to break that down into smaller pieces that you can achieve through shorter periods of time. I think it helps to make it a little less overwhelming, and you get to check the boxes when you meet those smaller goals, and that always helps motivate you to keep pushing forward. You also want to consider what resources you'll need. So, for example, if you want to own a home, maybe you need additional savings in case you need a home repair, or you want to build up your skill set for DIY home repairs. So, you want to consider what different resources you will need for your specific goals. Also, like I said, setting a deadline can help with that accountability to yourself with these goals and can make it feel a little easier to achieve. And you can also share your progress with a friend. That's another way to keep accountability going within your goals. And sometimes having that extra person to keep accountability with will really motivate you to keep moving forward. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but it's okay to revise goals. They are not set in stone. They're a plan to help you reach what you want. But sometimes life happens and your priorities might change. So, ways we can revise goals, these are just a few examples. You can think about, do you need to change the time frame or the specific amount you have for your goal? If you used your emergency fund, now what? How do you start saving for that new emergency fund? And also considering if you still care about a goal. If you set a goal to pay off student debt and then your debt gets forgiven, then that's obviously not going to be something that's in line with your goals, something that you still need to worry about. So it's okay to take those goals we set and revise them to those values that are always changing. And then next, we're going to talk about the income piece. So it's really important to know what we have coming in before we can plan for all of the money that needs to be spent in our lives. So we have these different kind of buckets that we put different income into. So you might have a job that can be regular wages that you're getting paid every 2 weeks. It might be you're getting paid every 2 weeks, but the amount changes based on your job and how many hours you're working. You might have seasonal income during a job that you only work maybe during the holidays or during certain seasons. And you might also have in this other category as well, gifts that only come once a year, or tax season, you get your refund every year. So we also want to look at benefits. Public benefits aren't always flexible. So as an example, SNAP only allows you to buy food, or a senior food box provides goods to consume, but not money to buy food. But using these programs allows you to save money on those items and then move that existing money to another part of your budget. So we also want to look at timing. Even if you applied to public benefits in the past, if a circumstance has changed, like income, there's an additional person in your house, maybe you had a baby or got married, then it's always important to reapply. Most programs also change their eligibility each year, so it might go up slightly each year. So even if in 2024, for example, if you made $100 too much to qualify, you might qualify now under the 2025 income limit. So it's always worth checking those things to reapply. You also want to check your paychecks for any wages you're getting and look at the deductions for taxes. Again, if your household has changed recently, like a new child, consider submitting a new W-4 form to your employer, which can change your take-home pay. And you also want to look at things like health savings account and different things that we can contribute as employees money into. And if you're contributing money to those things, but you aren't using the money to, for example, with an HSA, pay for medical expenses, maybe consider decreasing that amount and putting it towards the goal that is more in line with your values. And if we're looking at income specifically, if you want to look at ways to increase your income, you can always try to work more hours. You can ask for a promotion, look for better paying jobs, get training to obtain a new job. And also, once you retire, the longer you wait to retire, the more Social Security that you're able to get each year. So that's another way to consider how to increase that income, especially after you've stopped working. And then we have here an example of one of the CFPB worksheets to track your income and your benefits. So we'll send you, as Katie mentioned, all the links and all the resources to all of this. If you use the electronic version of this one, it will total all the columns for you. So it takes all the math out of it if you're not a math fan. And tracking by week instead of month altogether can really help you visualize when money is coming in. And then once we get to expenses, you'll know when those bills are coming out of your account. So it helps you to plan a little better within your budget. And also, when we're looking at income and how to fill in these boxes, you always want to use your net income, which is what you actually take home. So even if your salary is different, but if you're not taking home that much because of taxes and contributions to different accounts, then we don't want to be including that money that's going to taxes in our budget. So always use that net take home pay whenever you're doing this budgeting. And I think with that, I will pass it over to Katie.
So we've looked at how we track what income is coming in so we know what we can put into our spending and savings plans. So now we're going to look at all of the fun expenses that we have to also list to know how to stay on top of things. So if you have never before looked at tracking your expenses, you're going to want to take an easy approach to this to familiarize yourself with what is going on. So you want to start looking at what are those monthly bills that we're paying on a regular basis. Start tracking just what money you're spending for a month or two, not trying to make any adjustments to things yet, but just make sure you are familiar with what you're spending on and start thinking about how to categorize that. Is it housing expense? Is it a type of utility? Is it like food? Is it a need or a want or an obligation? So if you've never heard what is the difference between needs and wants and obligations, hopefully this is a great intro to it. So needs are things that we have to have in life. We have to have a roof over our heads. We need food to be able to eat. If you regularly take a medication, that is going to be a need. You need to keep taking that to keep yourself healthy. You'll see under needs, I have reliable transportation listed. You need reliable transportation, say, to get to a job. That does not always mean having a new car. Sometimes that means having access to a used car or maybe taking public transportation. I know those bus lines, they're talking about potentially changing them. So that might change in the future for you, what your reliable transportation looks like. But think about what is a reliable way to get to work that doesn't necessarily mean having an expensive car payment for a new car. Obligations are things that we are required to pay, but maybe we don't always want to pay them or they don't always make us happy. So debt repayment, if you have debts in your name, you're legally obligated to be paying those back, but it's not a fun part of our budget. If you are required to pay child or spousal support, that's also something that you are obligated to do, and we need to make space for that in our spending and savings plan. And then wants are things that we don't need them in order to survive. They're the nice frills, though, in life, but they're also where it's easiest sometimes to make cuts. So as we are getting familiar with just tracking what type of stuff we're spending money on, start thinking, does it fall into needs, wants, or obligations? And then in the future, which of those wants can you potentially cut in order to have more wiggle room in your spending and savings plan? So a newer TV, if you've got one that works and it's just older, that doesn't necessarily mean we need to buy a new TV just to have a new TV. If your TV has completely died, maybe that is a different conversation. But even if you need to replace something, if you wait a month or two, does it mean for that other month or two your spending and savings plan is a little better balanced with what else is going on? We obviously need to eat to sustain ourselves, but maybe it's not going to restaurants all the time, which tend to sometimes be more expensive. Or if you come to work every day and you're buying lunch out, that can really add up throughout a week as opposed to packing something in a lunch to bring with you to work. New video game systems, if you've got kiddos in your household, it is sometimes hard to convince them that they don't need the newest system or the newest game for that system. And I've got new car over here on our want. Sometimes, we need the reliable transportation. It's not always having a new car if there's a more affordable option out there. So here are a list of some common expenses. You may not have all of this, and that's fine. Everyone has different things that they're spending money on in their life. But if you've never had to start categorizing things, this is a great way to start thinking about it. So are we paying rent or mortgage based on if we own or rent our home or apartment? What are the different utilities you have? I have included phone and internet in here, especially if you're doing any work from home. I think they're more of a required utility now than they used to be considered like frivolous things in the past. But if you're working at home, you need to have that access to the internet. What cable and streaming services are you paying for? Obviously, food is on there, clothing, one giant category for transportation. Whether you have a monthly payment on a vehicle, repairs if something is broken, but also regular maintenance, like an oil changes or regular maintenance, insurance for your vehicle, or maybe you're doing bus passes or public transportation passes or ride share. It's all in a transportation category. You may have childcare or dependent care that you're paying for, all of your medical, dental bills, any debt repayment. I also threw up some things that come up at different points of the year, or maybe not everyone has. So birthday and holiday gifts comes and go throughout the different parts of the year. You may also regularly contribute to charities because you've decided that's a value in your life. So your spending and savings plan might include that, where someone you know may not include that. And I've got pets on there. I've got a cat. I definitely need to make space for him in my spending plan, but my parents who don't have a cat don't have to worry about those expenses in their plan. So as you're looking at what you're spending on, try to categorize it into these areas so you know where your money is going. And then also think about things like hidden fees. Is there a monthly payment that you forgot you have? When I buy a new cell phone, I often buy the cell phone insurance to go with it, because if it breaks, I can't replace it the next month after I just bought a whole expensive new phone. But after a year or two, I tend to take that cell phone insurance off. So if you do a similar thing, make sure you didn't forget and it's still charging your credit card somewhere. Or consider how many streaming services you have. We don't need to pay for every streaming service under the sun, and there are a million of them out there. So maybe there's a streaming service you forgot you had and you're still paying for. That's an easy thing to cut. Also think about temporarily just cutting some expenses. So if you're needing more wiggle room in your spending plan, maybe you cut a streaming service just for a month or two, or maybe half the year until your favorite show comes back on with its new season. You don't have to make permanent cuts to these things, but maybe a temporary cut gives you some more wiggle room. You can spend that money somewhere else. And there's always free alternatives. Libraries are great. They've got a ton of great books in there. They've got video games you can rent now. They have all sorts of TV things you can watch. There are also apps like Libby and Hoopla where you can also borrow things for free. So doing that for a couple months gives you some extra spending money that you can put somewhere else into your spending and savings plan. And as we looked at with our income, there's also different ways to categorize these expenses. So you can have a regular, irregular, and a seasonal expense. So regular expenses are things that we're always paying, whether it's monthly, like I have to pay my rent every month. I have a regular car insurance bill. It's only every 6 months that I do that one, but I regularly know that I have to do that twice a year. Irregular things are often unexpected expenses we're not planning for. So medical or dental bills, if you suddenly have to go to the doctor because you got sick, it's irregular because you couldn't necessarily plan for that to hit in a specific month, or maybe your pet gets sick and you have that unexpected vet bill. And then seasonal are things that fall at different times of the year every year. So we can plan for them coming up, but you don't have that expense every month. So for example, winter holidays are always going to be happening in the end part of the year. It happens every year. You can save some of your money throughout the year in expectation of a lot of expenses in December. Or I've got my family, all of their birthdays are in a 4-month period in the spring. So I know to plan seasonally when I'm buying their birthday presents for that. But then I know the rest of the year that I don't have to be doing their birthday presents then. So as you're also thinking of the expenses that you pay for, when are things going to hit your bank account? And are there ways, even if it's seasonal, that we can plan throughout the year for something that will be coming up? This is a screenshot of another worksheet that we're going to give you access to. And again, if you use the electronic version, it does the math for you. If you're printing it out, just make sure you have a calculator on hand to help add things up. But as you did with the income, we're going to look week by week when things hit our bank account during the month. And then we're going to start categorizing what they are. So are we paying monthly on a cell phone? What kind of debt payments do we have? Eating out is one line, and then you'll see a couple lines lower, groceries and other supplies like toilet paper. That's a separate line item then. So think about breaking out where your expenses, what categories they fall into, and then what week you're spending the money on them. And there's always the other section. You can add something in if it isn't automatically, on this worksheet. There are also some apps that do the same thing if you're like, I don't want to be doing this on a worksheet or by hand with a paper and pen. So some apps like EveryDollar or Rocket Money or You Need a Budget, they will connect with your bank account or credit card and like pull the purchases into them and categorize them for you. So if you want an app to do the work for you, that's great. Just make sure you're reviewing it at the same time so you know how it's categorizing things, and also so you have an idea again of when things are hitting during the month for you. Another really great way to be able to have an idea of what's going on with your expenses is to use a bill calendar. So this is an example of that. It allows you to write your regularly recurring bills on the top right hand of it, and then in the bottom to give a visual representation of when that is going to hit during the month. And you want to think about when you pay things versus when they're actually due. And this is like point number 3, that little black bubble there. If you're going to mail a payment, you need to be making sure you're getting that in the mail at least 7 days before it is actually due. So it has time to get there with the postal service. They have time to process it before it's going to be actually due on your account. Or if you're paying something online, try to go in at least 2 days early to make that payment, again, so that it processes it and then gets applied to your account by the time it is actually due. And this is great. You can make a new one for every month that you have because dates for things are going to change, and put it somewhere where you're going to see it, because if it's just like on your computer, it's maybe not helpful. Maybe print it out and stick it on your fridge or on a mirror you pass regularly on the inside of your door so you see it every day when you go out, if you're shopping or going to work, so that you can see like, oh, today's a day that I have to pay a bill, so that I know it gets paid on time for when it is actually due. And I always like to give an example of how I actually use this to help it more understandable for people. So this is what my month is going to look like coming up for April. So my Netflix, the one streaming service I have right now, always comes out of my bank account now on the 1st or 2nd. So I put it on the 1st so I make sure that it is coming out of there. I also need to make sure to pay my water bill on the 1st. It's actually due on the 3rd, but that way I know I am paying it on the 1st so that it is paid and like processed by the 3rd. The next week I have to make 2 credit card payments. Pay one on the 6th because it's actually due on the 8th. Pay one on the 8th because it is actually due on the 10th. That gives time for those payments to process before they're actually due. I also have to pay my internet that week, and then I get paid on the 11th, which is the fun day. The week after, I have to make sure to pay my electric. And since I pay my car insurance every 6 months, April, I have to make sure I go and pay that car insurance. So I've got my monthly things on here, but then I also added that weird thing that happens every 6 months. And you'll see the very last week on the 28th, I also have to do my yearly car registration. So again, I've got monthly things on here, something that happens every 6 months, something that happens once a year. But I want to make sure that I include that on here so that when those days hit on my calendar, I can check off, hey, you have actually paid this thing. Adding your pay dates on here is also a great visual for you to see when do you need to pay things versus when are you getting paid. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I have to pay in the beginning of April before I get paid on the 11th. Thankfully, I'll have money left over from March. I can pay some of those things before I get that payday on the 11th. And then what I get on the 11th can help pay for a few more things before I get paid on the 25th. If you are setting this up for yourself and you realize you are having a ton of expenses before you're getting paid, it's a great opportunity for you to reach out to any of the places you're paying, any of your utilities or maybe your credit card people, and say, hey, can I bump a payment to the next week? You want to make sure ask if they're going to charge you a fee for doing that, or ask if they're going to charge you like a fee just for changing it or a late fee because in their head it's late because you moved it a week later. But you want to make sure that you've got that money so that you can make a payment on it. Or if you're lucky enough you had some money left over from the month beforehand, maybe you're not as worried about it for April, but you may need to look at that in May or June when things are due versus when you have money left in your spending plan. It's always worth asking if they'll move a monthly payment for you. The worst they can say is no, but if they say yes, then it helps your budget a little better when you're making money come out of things. All right, those were our expenses. So now we're going to talk about savings because having savings is also really important for our spending and savings plan. Because any money you save now for an unexpected expense or a really large expense can save you money later in the future. So this includes having money in an emergency fund. A large percentage of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency bill that would pop up. That could be your fridge has died and you need to buy a new one. You need new tires on your car because the dealer won't give you the car back with crappy tires on and you need to be able to get to work. Or maybe you have a medical bill that you have to pay. I highly suggest if you've never started an emergency fund to start saving something for yourself. If you can save at least that 400, you've got something to go on if you have a large expense. It may not cover an entire medical bill, but what it allows you to do is pay for some of that with what you have saved, and then there's less money that you have to put on a credit card later, less money that you have to borrow from a friend or go onto a payment plan to deal with. So it is going to save you money in the long run because you don't have to pay interest or late fees on the entire amount of what you owe. They suggest building an emergency fund to the point where you have 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside. So this is why we want to be able to track what we're spending every month. If you have done your spending plan and you've looked at your bills and expenses and you know, I'm just going to use random numbers, every month you're spending $1,000 on things, then you know to have a 3-month emergency fund, you need to eventually set aside $3,000. No one is obviously going to save $3,000 right off the bat, but we add little bits at a time to our savings account to build up to that. And what that allows us to do is if you would lose your job or get sick and need to step away from your job for a while, you know for at least 3 months that you can afford all of your expenses. It gives you a little time to find a new job or recover from whatever our illness was before we can start working again to pay for things. They say 3 to 6. If you can get it to 6 months, that is fantastic. That gives you even more time that you have money set aside to pay your monthly expenses before we need to start working again or before we have to start putting things on credit cards or borrow money from friends. If that seems very daunting to have to think about saving $3,000, just remember we're going to break it into smaller actionable pieces that Annie talked about. Your goal is going to be $3,000 eventually, but you could say, I'm going to start with $500 that I want to save for this year. Give yourself however many months, like if you gave yourself 10 months to get there, that's only saving $50 a month. Add that little bit up every time into your savings account, and you will get there faster than you realize, especially if we put it in a savings account that helps us earn interest on it. So something is better than nothing. Don't feel you have to compare yourself to someone else who has a much larger emergency fund. We'd rather you start now than not start at all. So definitely work on our emergency fund. If you value gaining education for yourself, or maybe you value your children's ability to go to college and have higher education, anything you can save now for either of those means less student loans we have to take in the future, which means less interest we have to pay on and less debt that we have in the future. So again, anything you can save for that now is great. If you are looking to purchase a home for yourself or purchase a new or used car for yourself, again, anything you can save now means more of a down payment that you can put on either of those, which means a smaller loan that you need to take out and smaller monthly payments in the future. Also, if you're doing either of those, think about what money you can save in case either of those need a repair. You can also save money for irregular bills. If you want to have some money set aside in case your pet needs an emergency vet visit. Again, anything you set aside now leading up to that visit means less you have to put on a credit card later or less debt you take on later. Maybe what I do is I save a little bit of money every month so that when I have that car insurance bill every 6 months, I've got some money set aside to help pay for that instead of suddenly having a couple $100s that blows out my spending plan for that month. You can also save money throughout the year for different gifts, whether they're birthdays, maybe you have someone's wedding coming up that you have to buy a present for, save a little bit at a time until you get to the wedding and you buy them something. And also think about saving for retirement. Because again, anything we save now means we get a much nicer retirement in the future. And that might be if you're working, your company may have a 401k, or if you're at a nonprofit, a 403b that you can contribute to. Those are often things that are invested in the stock market. So just understand for yourself what that means, the risk involved with doing investments. There's lots of education online, including the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau will have information on that. But anything we can save now leading up to our retirement means more free money in the future that we get to live off of, which is great. Okay, so ways that we can save more. First, is there anything in your budget that we can cut, even just temporarily, decrease our expenses that lets us save a little bit? If I would cut out my Netflix just until Stranger Things final season comes on, I'd be saving $17 a month. $17 on its own doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add it up over several months, it can come into something big. And really, I'm just sitting here waiting for Stranger Things anyhow. So why am I paying for Netflix? You might have something like that. You might decide, I don't know, you're temporarily going to reduce your eating out part of your budget because you want to save a little bit because you value going on a vacation this summer and you'd rather be eating out at fancy restaurants when you go on your vacation. So that might be a place where you're decreasing some of your expenses now. Consider if you get extra paychecks throughout the year. So what this means is if you are paid every 2 weeks, there ends up being 2 months during the year where you get 3 paychecks during the month instead of just 2. So if you have set up your spending plan based on knowing you get 2 paychecks every month, when you get to that month where you have 3 paychecks, you don't need the money from that third paycheck to live on for your regular expenses. So you have a large chunk of money that isn't already spoken for essentially. And so you can kind of do whatever you want with that. So I know from my company, our months were January. So we had one already. And then in August, we'll have another month where we get 3 paychecks. So you can take that whole paycheck and do a lot with it. Maybe you take all of that money and you put it on one of your debts and pay a large chunk of money off at once. You don't have that money to like play with for fun things, but what you're doing is by paying off a large chunk of debt at once, it will save you money in the long run by not having as much interest you have to pay or not having as many months of still having to do like credit card payments maybe. Or maybe you wait for that extra paycheck and use that as the basis for your emergency fund because you will have a couple $100s that you can just stick into your savings account and that'll be the start of your emergency fund. You can always like take a little bit to do something nice for yourself, but think about you've got this opportunity with a large chunk of money to do something. How does that help you kick off whatever one of your goals is? And you can also, the third point, look at automatic savings and direct deposit. Some bank accounts will analyze how money comes into your account and how you're spending it as it goes out. And it's going to use some AI in the background, and it will be able to predict when it can transfer small amounts of money from your checking account into your savings account, and it'll do that automatically for you. You can also automate things like tell it on the first of every month, please move $100 into my savings account. And it'll continuously do that automatically for you until you turn it off. But that is great because it's not left up to us. And when it's left up to us, we often forget to do things if we're only doing it manually. So it's going to move that money every month into your savings account, which means that money is always going to be going in. You're always going to be earning interest on it, as opposed to sometimes we get busy and we forget to do something. And if we leave it up to just us, maybe we forget for 6 months and then you've lost 6 months of being able to save money. So automate if you can. Also, think about direct deposit for things. If you don't have direct deposit yet set up with an employer, think about doing that so it at least goes automatically into your checking account. But some employers will also let you split your paycheck into two accounts. So you could tell them, hey, every month I would like you to put $50 from my paycheck automatically into my savings account, and then whatever's left, please put that into my checking account. And again, once you set that up, it'll be automatic, so it's not going to depend on us to remember to move that $50 each time. So it's great when things can work in the background for us. And then as we're saving our money, there's lots of places we can put it. Savings jars, saving envelopes, piggy banks. If you've never saved any money, this might be a good way to start because you can visually see how much you're saving. It's also really great for kids, so they can kind of get on board with saving money as well. But our money is not working for us if we're doing it just in like a piggy bank. You can also get a prepaid card. What this means is you usually have to save up some amount of money. I'm going to say $300. You give it to whoever the card issuer is. And what they do is they give you a card back that's got a $300 spending limit on it. And that's really great. You can add that money to that card and set it aside. Maybe that's your card to use for emergency purposes. You know you can spend up to $300 on that. And then once you've spent the money, you can always like add money back to your card. But that's a good way you can sort of add money on that card to know you're only going to use it for a certain purchase. Our savings account is when we have an account with a bank that gives us an interest rate every month. So this is where our money starts to work for us. If you can put it in a savings account, you'll earn some interest. Brick and mortar banks, like if you walk into PNC or Citizens or something like that, tend to have a lower interest rate than what are online only banks. If you're not comfortable having your money in an online only bank, that's okay. At least get a savings account at your bank so you can earn some interest. Online only banks tend to have what is called a high yield savings account. So instead of earning something like 0.1% interest, you'll earn 3%, which means your money will grow larger quicker for you that way. If you only have a checking account, it's probably great to ask your bank where your checking account is to get you that savings account because they'll be connected. You can move money back and forth easily. You can also use Google or websites like bankrate.com to find other banks and check what those interest rates are. It'll tell you, which is really great. A college 529 account is a special investment account that helps pay for education. So you can open one of these for your kids or maybe a grandkid, and you can invest money into that account. It will grow until they hit 18 and they're ready to start spending money for college. It can help pay tuition, books. It can even help pay for room and board for them. Retirement account, I talked a little bit about this already, but check with your employer what they have because often if you put money into the retirement account, an employer will match some percentage of it. So maybe for every dollar you put in, they're adding 25 cents. 25 cents may not sound like a ton, but if you are planning to be at an employer for any amount of time, it's a lot of free money that's on the table. So you might as well think about investing at least the minimum it takes to get that match. And then, as I mentioned earlier, those are invested in things like stock markets and mutual funds. Do some research so you understand what you're comfortable investing in and how the stock market works, because it does have ups and downs. But that money, especially if you are younger, has decades maybe to grow into a large chunk of money for you to retire on. And then savings bonds do still exist with the federal government. You buy a bond maybe for $25 and it takes 10 to 15 years to mature. And once it matures, when you cash it in, maybe you get $50. They're not always a ton of money you get when you cash them in compared to maybe if you grab yourself a high yield savings account, but they're really great tools to also help kids start understanding how to save money. Grandparents often tend to buy these so that they mature at a point where their grandkid is ready to go to college. And then when the kid cashes it in, they've got a couple $100 to help pay for probably one textbook. But they're a great little tool to help kids also start to learn how to save their money. So all of this information we've talked about, different ways of tracking our income and expenses for our spending and savings plan. The way to put it all together, sort of, is to think about what is called a cash flow plan. Just another fun word for essentially what is your budget. But it will help you see how your money is flowing in and when your money is flowing in, and also how and when your money is flowing out of your account. And it will help you see maybe where we're falling short in a certain week of the month. And then it'll show that balance between our income and expenses. So again, this is an example of a worksheet you'll have access to. And how it works is in week 1, as the example we see in our column here, we had the starting money in our bank account. We added how much money we received during that week to get a total income of $650. And then our expenses that week also subtract out. So we had a total income of $650. We subtracted 200, we subtracted 35, we subtracted 15, and we ended up with a $400 weekly balance. And then if we follow our little arrows back to the top, you would take that 400, that was your starting amount for week 2. And you would continue to do this throughout your month. What was the money that came in each week? What were the expenses that came out? And what this can help you visualize is, let's say you get $1,000 in income throughout the whole month. You get 2 paychecks that are $500. And you know your expenses for a whole month are only $800. So income of 1,000, expenses of 800, but you can't understand why you're going broke in the middle of the month. And what this can help you look at is maybe all of your expenses are hitting in the first week or 2 before you're ever getting your pay. So you're essentially putting yourself in the negative before you have any income coming in. And then that will be a great visual for you to see, hey, maybe I can move some of these expenses to after I will get some of my pay so that I'm not going into the negative before my income is coming in. You'll want to use this in conjunction with the tracking income and tracking expenses worksheet, and also our bill calendar. If you're a great visual person, you will, once you start working on this, you'll start seeing like, oh, this is why like maybe my money isn't making me feel great because I feel like I'm going broke all the time. And then how to improve that cash flow plan, I mentioned it a little bit. You can see if you can change any billing due dates until after you've received your income, or like I have my car insurance set up to pay it that every 6 months. Maybe that really big bill when it hits your plan is just wrecking havoc and you really need a smaller monthly payment because it's much more manageable for you. You can talk to certain bill providers to say, hey, can I break this out into any smaller monthly payment? Sometimes this means you'll pay a fee to do that. So just ask them up front, like, am I going to owe any extra money if I do this? Because we want to know if that's going to happen. Also, think if you apply for public benefits. Annie talked about this earlier in our income section. If we are just really struggling with the food part of our budget, do we qualify now for SNAP? Maybe we didn't qualify before, or maybe there's a new person in your household, whether, I don't know, a parent moved in and you have an extra person you have to feed, or there's a new baby in the household. Like that can change your income eligibility and household eligibility. So think about getting those public benefits that can help us pay for some of this stuff. And sometimes people feel a certain way about needing to use public benefits. I would encourage you to try to change your mindset around that. They exist to help us. And you don't have to stay on it forever if you feel a certain way about it. Take that help for a little bit of time so that it helps you balance out your spending and savings plan. And then you're always welcome to come off it later if you feel like your budget is working for you a lot better. Also review your income tax withholding. Some of this is, if we have that new baby in our household, maybe it means we qualify as a head of household, which when you file your taxes can impact how much of a refund you get. But it also means that you could have less tax withheld from your pay during the year. And so your refund will be not as large as you expect it to be when you file, but what it means is you had more of your money during the year every month so that it can help your monthly budget during that time. So you might end up with a smaller refund, but it just meant you had your money during the year instead of having to wait till that one point in April when you get your refund. You can also inquire if you would qualify for an income-based repayment plan. This happens a lot if you have student loans. They will let you pay a smaller amount of money every month because you're telling them what your income is and that you essentially don't have more income to be spending on it. This can also sometimes increase the total money that you pay them over the entire life cycle of your loan. You'll have more months you have to pay because they're breaking it out into smaller months, smaller amounts every month, which means it extends the time that you have to pay, which then means we pay a little bit extra interest. But if you do that for a year or two when your income is lower, maybe that is what makes your budget work for you then. And then you can always make larger payments later to help make up for that. Or you can see if there is a lower interest rate on anything that you're paying, whether you can always ask your credit card company, hey, are you willing to lower my interest rate? Again, the worst they say is no and nothing changes, but maybe they are willing to give you a lower interest rate, which means you have a lower monthly payment. Or sometimes you hear this being called refinancing your home mortgage. This may not work as well for people because interest rates have gone up compared to what they were even like 5 years ago. So maybe the interest rate they're going to offer you is not actually lower right now. But again, something you can investigate for yourself and investigate for your finances, because if it would make a difference, it's worth asking them about. And then what do we do if there's just not enough money during the month when we need to pay things? So again, think about applying for any public benefits, even temporarily, just to help that spending plan along. You can look at getting an additional job or maybe seasonal work. It doesn't have to be all the time. Maybe you pick up some work in the summer helping mow lawns, or in the winter when everyone is doing their holiday shopping, you take up an extra shift or two at Target or Walmart or something. It doesn't have to be long term, just something that helps your budget along so that you can, whether that's making your budget work monthly, or maybe it is taking that opportunity to earn extra income to make larger payments on our debt that we owe. You can think about asking your employer for a raise or maybe additional hours. Again, the worst they say is no, but maybe they like your spunk and going out and asking for more money and they will give you a raise. Or if you have done work to take extra training to do different tasks at your agency or wherever you're working, or maybe you're training new hires, it's worth asking, hey, I'm doing this additional work for the company. Is there any additional compensation that you can give me? We've got advocating for higher wages in here as well. This can be advocating for higher wages at your own agency or for all workers out there. If a lot of jobs are based on the federal minimum wage that's only hitting like $7.25 an hour, it means it's decreasing wages for people across the board. So are you willing to advocate for everyone to have a higher minimum wage? It means everyone's budgets get to work for them a little better. And then also having a garage sale or yard sale, whatever you would like to refer to it. Americans have a lot of stuff. We don't always think that we do, but really we have a lot of stuff. Is there anything sitting around your home that you don't need anymore that you're willing to sell? You're never going to get like the price that you paid for it, so just be aware of that. I have a ton of books in my house. Once I read them and I know like it was a great read, but it's not a book I need to keep forever, I'm taking those things to half price books to get whatever money I can get back from it, because that is just a little boost to my budget that month. Or can you decrease any expenses? Again, there are benefits that you can apply for that decrease expenses. So during winter, you can qualify for LIHEAP, which helps pay your heating bill, which means you are not paying your heating bill. So it's not like cash they give you to spend, but they're paying your bill for you. Do you qualify for anything like that? Can you avoid any fees by paying something on time? Maybe it's a struggle to get a bill paid during the month that it comes to you, but if you pay it that month, you're saving a $10 or $15 late fee. If you're paying late fees, like $10 may not seem like a ton of money, but if you're doing that every month, that's $120 that you've spent on late fees throughout the year. So can you save any of that money by paying something on time? Coupons and sales, I do this every time I go grocery shopping. There's not a lot of like actual coupons to clip out of paper these days. It's usually in a store's app, but I will scroll through that app and see what is on sale compared to what I need to be buying that week. And sometimes it's changing a brand of what I am buying to get the sale for it. Can you pack lunch instead of buying anything? I have a stack of like little protein bars at my desk at work because I know if I forget to pack my lunch, my option is to have to buy it while I'm at the office, which means spending a lot of money that I would rather spend in different places. So what I've done is put a pack of protein bars in my desk so that when I forget to pack lunch, I can at least eat that instead of going and buying food at a restaurant. If you love hitting the vending machine at your place of work and you get like a can of soda and some little treat out of the machine every day, that's maybe cheaper than going to a restaurant and buying lunch every day. But do you have the opportunity, like I suggested, can you have a box of something that's at your desk so you don't have to hit the vending machine? It'll probably be a little cheaper. Energy conservation is great for the winter and also the summer. For the winter, can you keep your heat even a couple degrees cooler in your house? And maybe sit under a blanket. That means we're not using as much fuel to heat our house, which means our heating bill will be lower. Or in the summer, do we not, put our air conditioning on 67 degrees, which would be nice and chilly compared to the outside, but it uses a lot of energy to do that. Can you keep it even just a couple degrees warmer instead? Not telling you to keep it like 80 degrees in the summer, but even 70 compared to like 68 can make a difference in energy bills sometimes. And since we're in tax season, look for a free tax preparation service. So our agency has one of these. It's called a VITA program. There are also other agencies around the area and very specific free websites that we will share in our follow-up email where you do not have to pay someone $300 to do your taxes and get your refund. So even looking at things like that, will that help you save any money so that you can move money to other parts of your spending plan? Don't feel like you have to write down all these emails or websites. You'll have access to this as well, but other resources that might help you. The Financial Empowerment Center is fantastic. They will sit with you one-on-one for free and help you create your spending and savings plan. I've used them. They're fantastic. They really let you lead with what are your goals, and then they will work alongside you to reach that. Advantage Credit Counseling is good if you have a lot of credit card debt. They can help you get on top of that and make a plan for yourself for how to pay that down. The CFPB worksheets, you will get a link to a Google Drive to access all of those worksheets, but you can also just go on the CFPB's website to access things. Those are the two free links for filing your taxes. My Free Taxes is run through United Way, so it's definitely free. And then Direct File is the new IRS program where you can file directly with the IRS for free as well. And then you'll have links to some of our other programs. We've got an adult case management program if you would like someone to work alongside you as you prepare education goals for yourself or maybe job goals. And then we've got lots of upcoming events, including next month. If you want to learn about how to prepare for home ownership, we're going to do another financial webinar on Tuesday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. You can hear from one of our partners, Mon Valley Initiative, on how to get ready for home ownership.